You've been paying a price your entire life, and you didn't even know the invoice was being sent. Every time you were honest when lying would have saved you. Every time you kept a promise nobody was watching. Every time you chose loyalty over survival. Every single one of those moments cost you something. And the most dangerous part, society convinced you those costs were noble. Think about it. You watched the good people around you get walked on. The loyal employee who got replaced by someone younger and cheaper. The faithful friend who got betrayed the moment they became inconvenient. The honest person in the negotiation who left money on the table because they didn't want to seem greedy. And you thought to yourself, I don't want to be that person, but then you did the same thing anyway. Because goodness isn't a choice anymore. It's a cage you were taught to lock yourself into so willingly that you forgot it was there. Here's the brutal truth nobody tells you. Goodness, in a world that doesn't play fair, is just another word for weakness with a moral alibi. 500 years ago, a man named Machiavelli watched power operate in the real world, not in the fantasy of ethics, textbooks, or Sunday sermons. He didn't judge what he saw, he simply documented it. And what he found was this: the people who rise, who succeed, who command respect and resources and loyalty, almost never do it through the methods you were taught. They do it through strategic thinking, through understanding human nature without the handicap of moral judgment, through recognizing that goodness is a tool, not a truth. And most importantly, they understand the cost of being good, and they refuse to pay it. Today, I'm going to show you 5 psychological principles that will fundamentally change how you operate in the world. You're going to learn why goodness fails, how power actually works, and more importantly, how to become someone whose presence commands respect instead of someone whose kindness gets exploited. This isn't about becoming evil. This is about becoming strategically intelligent. This is about protecting yourself in a game that's already rigged against nice people. And I want you to understand something right now. I'm not telling you to become ruthless or cruel. I'm showing you something far more dangerous: how to be good when it serves you, and how to stop being good when the world has shown you it doesn't deserve it. Now, drop this affirmation in the comments. Goodness is my choice, not my chain. Let's begin. Number 1. The goodness trap: why your virtue is someone else's advantage. You were taught that goodness is its own reward. That if you're honest, loyal, and kind, the universe will eventually reward you. That good things happen to good people. And maybe you even believed it for a while. Until you watched good people suffer and bad people thrive. Until you realized that goodness doesn't protect you, it makes you predictable. Here's what happens psychologically. When you're known as the good person, you become trapped in what psychologists call a consistency bias. This means people expect you to behave a certain way, and if you deviate from that, they see it as a betrayal or a character flaw. But here's the insidious part. Other people don't have this same obligation. The manipulator can be cruel one day and charming the next, and people excuse it. They say, that's just how they are. But when you're good, and you finally stand up for yourself, suddenly you're not being yourself, or you've changed. The person who's been exploiting your goodness feels personally victimized when you stop. They've benefited from your predictability for so long that your boundaries feel like a betrayal to them. This is the goodness trap. You're locked into a role. You're not a person anymore. You're a utility, a source of emotional labor, validation, or resources that others have learned they can access without resistance. Machiavelli observed this centuries ago. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." What he meant was this: your reputation is a tool, and most people are so trapped in their perception of you that they can't see you clearly anymore. The good person's reputation becomes a cage because people will fight to keep you in character. They'll gaslight you if you try to step outside it. They'll call you selfish, They'll say you've become someone they don't recognize. What they really mean is you've stopped being useful in the way they expected. Let me paint you a picture. You're in a workplace. You've built a reputation as the person who stays late, who helps everyone, who never says no. One day, you have something important to handle, something for yourself. You tell your boss you can't work late that evening, and suddenly you're seeing the real face of the organization. The boss is disappointed, your co-workers are inconvenienced, and they all start treating you differently. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you violated the unspoken contract of your goodness. You were supposed to be endlessly available. Most people at that moment feel guilty. They question themselves. They wonder if they were being selfish. So they go back to staying late, back to being the good person, back into the cage. The powerful person does something different. They understand that a reputation for goodness is only valuable if it can be weaponized. If you're always good, goodness loses its power. It becomes expected, normal, invisible. But if you're strategically good when it serves you, unavailable when it doesn't, suddenly your kindness means something. It becomes scarce. And in psychology, what's scarce is valuable. This is the scarcity principle at work. Here's what this looks like in practice. The powerful person is kind to those who matter. They're generous with their time for people who've earned it. But they don't distribute their goodness equally to everyone. They understand that goodness is a currency, and like all currencies, inflation destroys its value. When you give it to everyone, it's worthless. When you give it strategically, it becomes powerful. Drop this affirmation. My goodness is a weapon, not a weakness. Number 2, the silence principle. The power of not defending what needs no defense. One of the most dangerous habits good people have is the need to explain themselves. Someone questions your decision, and you feel compelled to justify it. Someone misunderstands your intentions, and you're driven to clarify. Someone criticizes you, and you're almost involuntarily constructing your defense. This is a psychological pattern called need for cognitive closure. Your brain hates ambiguity. It hates the feeling that someone has a negative perception of you. So you work frantically to close that gap, to make them understand, to fix their image of you. And every time you do it, you're surrendering power. Here's why. When you explain yourself, you're implicitly accepting their right to judge you in the first place. You're validating the question. You're saying their opinion matters enough to warrant your defense. And once you start defending, you're already losing. Because there's no amount of explanation that will convince someone who's decided not to believe you. The harder you try to convince them, the more desperate you appear. And desperate people have no power. Machiavelli said, "A prince must learn how not to be good." But what he really meant was, a prince must learn how not to care what others think about whether he's good. He doesn't need their validation. He doesn't need their understanding. His actions speak. His results speak. And if they don't understand, that's genuinely not his problem. The good person is obsessed with being understood. The powerful person is obsessed with being effective. These are opposite orientations. Think about someone you know who seems to operate from a place of genuine power. Notice how little they explain themselves. Notice how comfortable they are with other people misunderstanding them. Notice how they don't defend their choices. They make a decision, they execute it, and if people don't like it, they're unmoved. This isn't arrogance, it's freedom. Most people see a boundary crossed and immediately launch into explanation mode. I can't do that because you don't understand. I have. Let me explain why that won't work. They're trying to make the other person understand, as if understanding will lead to agreement. But here's the psychological truth. Most people don't change their minds because of better explanations. They change their minds because of consequences or because they respect the person more. The powerful response is different. Someone pushes a boundary. You say, "That doesn't work for me." No explanation, no defense, no elaboration. And the silence that follows is devastating, because the other person is now trapped in their own uncertainty. They don't know why you said no. They're trying to figure it out. And in that space of not knowing, they actually respect you more, not less. Here's what this looks like in real life. Someone asks you to do something you don't want to do. Your instinct is to explain why. Your coworker is upset about a decision you made. Your instinct is to justify it. Your family thinks you're making a mistake. Your instinct is to convince them otherwise. And every single time you follow that instinct, you're weakening yourself. The new you hears the question, or the criticism, or the boundary challenge, and you respond with strategic silence. You say what you need to say. "That's not happening. I've made my decision. That's not something I'm discussing." And then you stop talking. You don't fill the silence. You don't get pulled into explanation. You sit with their discomfort. This operates on something psychologists call the illusory truth effect. The more someone hears you explain and defend yourself, the more they unconsciously believe you're lying. It's counterintuitive, but it's true. Innocent people often don't feel the need to explain themselves extensively. Guilty people do. So when you're constantly explaining, you're signaling that you feel guilty even when you shouldn't. Drop this affirmation. Silence is my strength. Number 3. The respect equation, trading likability for the only currency that actually matters. This is going to sound harsh, but you need to hear it. People do not follow people they like. They follow people they respect. And these are almost never the same person. Think about the people in your life who genuinely command respect. Are they the nicest people? Are they the ones who are always trying to make everyone comfortable? Or are they the ones who have standards, who enforce boundaries, who are willing to make unpopular decisions? Good people are obsessed with being liked. They unconsciously believe that if everyone likes them, they'll be safe, they'll be protected, they won't be left out or rejected. So they optimize for likability. They say yes to things they want to say no to. They suppress their opinions if they're unpopular. They soften their edges. They become agreeable. And they're shocked when they realize that being liked doesn't translate to being valued. That the people who like them are also using them. That likability is actually a sign of weakness in the eyes of anyone with real power. Machiavelli understood something fundamental about human nature. Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. And he concluded that fear is the more reliable motivator, not because he was evil, but because he was honest about how humans actually operate. Love is fickle. It changes with circumstances. Today, someone loves you, tomorrow they love someone else. But fear is stable. Fear keeps people consistent. Now, this doesn't mean you should be feared in the sense of being dangerous or cruel. It means you should be the kind of person people are afraid of, disappointing. People who respect you are afraid of losing your respect. People who respect you don't want to cross you. This is a far more sustainable form of power than being liked. Here's the psychological mechanism. When you're trying to be liked, you're operating from a scarcity mindset. You're afraid there's not enough approval to go around, so you chase it. You perform for it. And people can smell that desperation. They unconsciously view you as lower status. But when you're operating from a position of not needing their approval, something shifts. You're higher status. And high-status people attract respect naturally. Let me show you what this looks like in contrast. The old you is in a meeting. The boss suggests something you think is a bad idea. The old you nods along, adds some positive comments, and maybe gently suggests an alternative while making sure the boss knows you think they're smart and capable. You're managing his ego. You're optimizing for likability. The new you is in the same meeting. The boss suggests something you think is a bad idea. You say, "I don't think that will work," and you explain why. You're not rude. You're not dismissive. But you're also not performing. You're not managing anyone's emotions but your own. And something interesting happens. The boss respects you more. Even if he doesn't take your advice, he respects you more. This is because respect comes from authenticity, boundaries, and the willingness to risk disapproval. Likability comes from compliance and people-pleasing. They're inverse qualities. The cost of goodness is this. You trade respect for likability, and then you spend the rest of your life wondering why people don't value you more, why they keep pushing for more, why they don't take you seriously. The answer is because you optimized for the wrong thing. Drop this affirmation. Respect over approval. Number 4. The narrative trap. Reclaiming control of your own story. There's a story about you, and it's not the one you think you're telling. You know the story you tell yourself. I'm a good person. I'm someone who helps others. I'm loyal. I'm trustworthy. That's your internal narrative. But there's another narrative running in parallel, the one everyone else is telling themselves about you. And you have far less control over that one than you think. Here's the psychological truth. People don't perceive you as you are. They perceive you through the filter of the first impression you made, the role you've played consistently, and the narrative they've constructed about you. And once that narrative is set, it's remarkably difficult to change. This is called narrative control, and it's one of the most powerful tools in the psychological toolkit. The person who controls the narrative about you controls how people respond to you. And if you're a good person, you've likely given control of your narrative to other people. You do this by being consistent, predictable, and transparent. Good people think transparency is a virtue. They believe if people understand their true motivations, they'll be judged fairly. But here's what actually happens. People understand your motivations, and they exploit them. They know exactly what buttons to push, because you've explained your entire operating system to them. Machiavelli was clear about this. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The powerful person controls the appearance while keeping the reality hidden. This isn't dishonesty. This is strategy. Think about someone you know who people are always confused about. They'll say, "I don't know what drives him," or "He's hard to read," or "You never really know what she's thinking." That person has narrative control. And because of that mystery, people respect them more. They pay more attention to them. They don't take them for granted. In contrast, think about someone you know well, someone who's told you everything about themselves, who's explained all their fears and insecurities, who's completely transparent. How do you relate to that person? With affection, maybe. But with respect? With caution? Probably not. Here's what this looks like in practice. You're dealing with someone who keeps pushing your boundaries. The good response is to explain why that boundary exists, why it matters to you, what you're afraid of. You're trying to make them understand. The powerful response is to enforce the boundary without explanation. Let them wonder why. Let them construct their own narrative about what it means. And in that construction, they'll respect you more than if you'd explained. This is psychological projection at work. People project their own fears and assumptions onto others. So if you're distant and mysterious, they'll assume you're confident. If you're inconsistent about what you'll tolerate, they'll assume you have high standards. The narrative they create about you has more power than the truth about you. The second part of narrative control is this. You get to rewrite your own story. You're not stuck being the good person. You're not locked into the role of helper or fixer or loyal friend. You can change how you operate. And most people won't even notice because they're not paying as close attention to you as you think they are. And the few who do notice will be confused, which actually increases your power. Drop this affirmation. I control my story. Number 5. The energy economy. Why protecting your energy is the ultimate power move. Every interaction drains energy, every conversation, every favor, every emotional moment. And good people have been taught that draining their own energy to fill others is noble. It's called sacrifice. It's called love. It's called being a good person. But here's what nobody told you. Energy is a finite resource. You have a certain amount each day, and the way you spend it determines the quality of your life and your capacity to achieve anything meaningful. When you give your energy away indiscriminately to people who don't deserve it, to conversations that don't matter, to situations that drain without fulfilling, you're not being good. You're being stupid. You're undermining your own ability to do anything of real value. The powerful person understands this intuitively. They're selfish about their energy. They guard it ruthlessly. They don't explain why they won't take on additional projects. They don't justify why they're not answering your call right now. They've built an awareness that their energy is precious and limited, and they're not going to waste it. Machiavelli said, "He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation." What he meant was, if you're focused on what you should be doing, being a good person, helping everyone, being available, instead of what needs to be done for your own success, you will fail. Think about a vampire, a psychological vampire. Not literally, I mean people who drain your energy. And notice something, they're never attracted to powerful people. They're attracted to good people. They're attracted to people with open doors and soft boundaries, and a belief that they should help. Why? Because those people don't protect their energy. The moment you start protecting your energy, vampires lose interest. They'll sense it. They'll try to pull you back in. You're so different now. You've become cold, but they'll ultimately move on to easier prey, and you'll be free. Here's what this looks like in real life. Someone asks you for a favor. Your instinct is to say yes. The good person says yes, drains themselves, and resents the other person for not appreciating the sacrifice. The powerful person says no, or says, "I'll consider it," with no guilt attached. The powerful person understands that their energy is not an infinite resource, that every yes to someone else is a no to themselves. And here's the psychological truth. Underneath this, most people don't actually respect you more when you sacrifice your energy for them. They respect you more when you have boundaries. They value you more when you're selective about how you spend your time. This is another reversal that nobody teaches you. Drop this affirmation. My energy is gold, and I am the gatekeeper. Number 6. The hidden cost, understanding the price you're already paying. Let's be direct about this. Being good in an unfair world costs you things, real things, and you're paying that price right now, whether you acknowledge it or not. It costs you money. How? Because you're not negotiating fiercely for what you deserve, because you're taking on work that should pay more than it does, because you're not charging what you're worth, because someone good doesn't want to seem greedy. So you leave money on the table constantly. It costs you time, because you're available when you shouldn't be, because you say yes when you should say no, because you're managing other people's emotions and solving other people's problems instead of focusing on your own life. And time is the only resource you cannot get back. It costs you respect, because as we've discussed, people don't respect those they can walk on. And a good person is someone who can be walked on without consequence, so people do. And they lose respect for you in the process. Not because you did something disrespectful, but because you didn't defend yourself. It costs you peace, because you're always wondering if you did enough, if you're being selfish, if you should have helped more. Your conscience is a tyrant, and it's enslaving you to a moral standard that the people around you don't follow, and most insidiously, it costs you your potential. Because every moment you're spending being good for others, is a moment you're not spending becoming great for yourself. You're not building. You're not creating. You're not developing power. You're distributing yourself to people and situations that will never repay you. Machiavelli observed, "Benefits ought to be conferred gradually, and in that way they will taste better." What he meant was this: if you give everything at once, it loses its value. Good people give everything at once. They give all their attention, all their energy, all their loyalty immediately, and then they wonder why they're not appreciated. Because you've already given what they want. There's nothing left to chase. The people who maintain power maintain it by rationing, by being scarce, by making people work to earn access to them. This keeps them valuable. This keeps them desired. Here's the brutal reality check you need. The cost of goodness is compounding. Each year you operate this way, the debt grows. You're not just losing this year's earnings or this month's peace. You're losing the compounded value of everything those resources could have become. The relationships you didn't build because you were helping people who didn't deserve your time. The skills you didn't develop. The reputation you didn't build. The goals you didn't chase. And the system that benefits from your goodness, your family, your friends, your workplace, has been built on the expectation that you'll continue to pay this price forever. Drop this affirmation. I reclaim what goodness has cost me. Number 7. The transformation. How to be good when it serves you, and ruthless when it doesn't. This is the most important lesson because it's where theory becomes practice. Because you can't just stop being good. That's not the answer. If you try to flip a switch and become cold, you'll fail, you'll feel guilty, you'll revert, and you'll reinforce the lie that there's something wrong with wanting to be good. The answer is to become strategically good. To understand that goodness is a tool, not a truth. That you can be kind when it serves you and unavailable when it doesn't. That you can be loyal to those who've earned it and indifferent to those who haven't. The transformation looks like this. You keep your kindness, but you make it rare. You keep your loyalty, but you make it conditional. You keep your honesty, but you keep your vulnerability selective. You keep helping, but you charge for it not always in money, but in respect, in reciprocity, in acknowledgement. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. You must become both, strategic and strong, intelligent and fearless, capable of reading people and capable of standing unmoved." Here's how this works in practice. Someone asks for your help with something that benefits them and costs you. The old you feels guilty saying no. The new you asks yourself one question: what will I get from this? If the answer is nothing, you decline, not with an explanation, but with a simple, "I can't help with that." And you're unbothered by their disappointment. Someone tests your boundary. The old you explains why the boundary exists. The new you simply enforces it. That's not happening. You don't justify, you don't defend, you don't negotiate, you just don't move. Someone shares a secret or a vulnerability with you, expecting you to reciprocate. The old you feels obligated to share equally. The new you listens, you acknowledge, but you don't trade vulnerability for vulnerability. You keep your cards closer. You remain slightly mysterious, and they respect you more for it. Someone tries to manipulate you through guilt. The old you feels the guilt. The new you feels it and ignores it. You recognize it as a manipulation technique, and you act from clarity, not from emotion. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's about becoming intelligent. It's about understanding that your goodness is a resource, and resources are meant to be managed, not squandered. The transformation also includes this. You become harder to read. You're warm some days and distant on others, and people can't figure out why. You're generous with your time to certain people and completely unavailable to others. You're vulnerable about some things and impenetrable about others. This inconsistency is actually your superpower because it keeps people uncertain about where they stand with you. And uncertainty breeds respect. Drop this affirmation. I am strategically good. I am intelligently powerful. Ending. The new you. You came into this video as someone who believed goodness was a virtue that would protect you. You leave it understanding that goodness is a choice, and you get to choose when and where and to whom you extend it. You've learned that a reputation for endless goodness is actually a cage. That silence is more powerful than explanation. That respect matters infinitely more than likability. That you control your own narrative. That your energy is your most precious resource. That goodness has already cost you more than you realize. And that the most powerful position you can occupy is being strategically, intelligently good. You started this video as one person. You're finishing it as someone completely different. You're no longer the person who automatically says yes. You're no longer the person who feels obligated to explain themselves. You're no longer the person who needs to be understood or liked. You're becoming the person who sets the terms, and the world will test you immediately. People who've benefited from your old goodness will push against your new boundaries. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll try to make you feel guilty. This is inevitable, and it's the proof that you're on the right path. The moment people start pushing back is the moment you know you've reclaimed some power. Stand firm. You didn't do this for comfort. You did this to survive in a world that plays for keeps. And you've gone too far in this video to go back to being what you were. Here's what I want you to understand in this final moment. You are no longer the person who gets walked on. You are becoming the person whose presence commands respect. You are becoming someone dangerous, not in the sense of being cruel, but in the sense of being unpredictable, unmovable, and completely in control of your own game. If this video changed how you think about yourself, if it gave you permission to stop paying a price you never owed, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and I know you know someone. Subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're going deeper every single week. Remember this: in a world full of sheep, don't become a wolf, become a shepherd. And shepherds don't explain themselves to the flock.